Hello, everybody. I'm John Green, the interim president of the University of Akron, and also the director of the Ray C. Bliss Institute of Applied Politics. The Institute takes a bipartisan approach to research and teaching about the political process. In particular, we place a special emphasis on understanding political parties and campaigns, grassroots activity, and ethical behavior. That's why we bring this program to you today. This November, Ohio voters will elect a new governor and decide between candidates for a U.S. Senate seat. To better inform you and other voters, we invited candidates from the two major political parties to sit down for a one-on-one interview with Tom Beres. Tom is a highly respected senior political correspondent, recently retired from WKYC TV in Cleveland. He's also a member of the Cleveland Press Club Hall of Fame. Instead of sound bites or debates, you'll hear each candidate engage in an in-depth discussion of the issues that are of real importance to Ohio voters. Thank you for your interest, and on behalf of the University of Akron and the Ray C. Bliss Institute of Applied Politics, please enjoy the discussion.
Election day is bearing down on us, and early voting is well underway. I'm Tom Beres, former longtime political reporter at Cleveland's WKYC TV. As you heard, the University of Akron's Bliss Institute of Politics is sponsoring my long-form interviews with the major candidates for Ohio's biggest offices, governor and U.S. senator. Joining us this morning, Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown, who is up against Republican Jim Renacci to try and keep his Senate seat. Senator, appreciate you coming by and appreciate you giving us a big chunk of your time here.
Glad to, thanks.
All right.
I like the long form interview.
All right, well, let's try and get as much out of it as we can.
Sounds like a sports term, but okay.
All right. All right, so we'll deal with news of the day. Congressman Renacci's tactics in the last couple of weeks, focusing largely on ugly, unpleasant details of your 30-some-year-ago divorce, and then claiming that multiple women had called his office with claims that you had assaulted them, and now the latest, a woman attorney who has some credentials, we're told, in the area of domestic violence, who also happens to be a business partner supporter of Mr. Renacci, representing that she's talked with a woman who has, nameless woman, no details, but it describes a particular incident involving you where I guess you could politely say the way it's phrased is, well, came on way too strong and got kind of physical. So what is your response to what's taking place here in the campaign?
Well, we're in Summit County. This is Congressman Renacci's home county, and people in Summit County, from students in the audience that grew up here, or people that go to Akron U, or people that live in Summit County, have for some time seen that Jim Renacci has trouble with the truth. He is lying about this. He's had a history of that. He's had a history of running campaigns and ethically playing on the edge. He made $13 million in income one year and tried to avoid paying taxes on it. The Ohio Department of Taxation made him pay interest and back taxes. He was a registered lobbyist as a member of Congress. I've never seen anybody do that. He is one of his closest associates, went to prison, a corrupt businessman who gave Congressman Renacci $100,000. He has a history of running campaigns where he doesn't tell the truth, and he has a history of serving where he doesn't tell the truth. I've had a lot of opponents in my time in Congress, and I've never had one that has engaged in these kinds of lies.
So all of these claims that are being rolled out, and you wonder if there'll be more shoes dropping here, these are all false, bogus?
Congressman Renacci is lying about everything, about all of that.
So does that make this campaign personal?
I try not to make it personal. I mean, he's attacked my family. I have grandchildren. They're not old enough to understand yet, but social media and pictures have a long way of, and campaign literature has a long shelf life, but he's attacked my family. I want this race to be about Ohio families, these students here and their student debt, about climate change, about the dignity of work, and he doesn't choose to talk about those. I will use this interview to talk about issues that affect
and we will get
families.
to that. So none of these incidents, as he's alleging, you have no clue what he's talking about. These are all false, bogus.
He's lying.
The end of one of those ads has a phone number on it that says, call Senator Brown and tell him to step down. Is that line getting a lot? Is that getting a lot of phone calls?
I don't know.
Is that your office? Where is that number?
I don't know what the number is. I don't sit around and look at Congressman Renacci's ads,
Okay.
but I have more things to do.
All right.
But people, I mean, there's always people that don't like any of us, so that's okay.
All right, turn the page.
Sure.
All right, so the political climate of Ohio has changed significantly in the last 12 years during your time in the Senate and, well, since dating back to your time in Congress, kind of moving to the right and getting more red. And the congressman has represented that, well, you are out of step. You're so liberal, you're out of step with mainstream Ohio. Maybe there are scorecards that say you're the fourth most liberal in Congress. I actually found one, I think, Progressive Power or something like that, just had you to the left of Bernie Sanders. If someone says that you're out of step with the political mood in Ohio, what do you say to that? Is there no validity to that?
I've won elections because I represent mainstream Ohio, and if you love your country, you fight for the people who make it work. And I get up every day ready to fight for Ohio workers, whether you punch a clock or swipe a badge, whether you're working on salary, whether you're working for tips, whether you're a retiree, whether you're raising children or caring for an aging parent. And I will, I'll tell you, we're a perfect example where people are upset in this country because they just saw Congress jam through a tax bill where 3/4 of the benefit goes to the richest 1%. People like my opponent, he's one of the richest members of Congress. 3/4 of the benefits go to the richest 1%. And now the leaders in Congress are saying, well, to pay for that tax cut, we've got to raise the eligibility age for Medicare. We got to cut Social Security. And I assume they're going to want to go after student loan interest rates, and they're going to go after all kinds of the cleanup of Lake Erie. I mean, you don't give tax cuts to the richest people and then make working families and students in the middle class pay for it. That's what they've done. That's why I will win this election, because I stand up for those families that understand the dignity of work and respect the dignity of work, regardless of whether you work on a college campus like this or you work at a hospital or a grocery store or a construction site or an office building.
As the only elected Democrat in statewide office currently, is there some special pressure on you, you think?
No, I represent, it's funny, there's a group of people I know that will never vote for me. I understand there are people that they're either very strong Republicans or they don't like my position on X or Y or Z, but I represent them too, and my office is known far and wide by people in both parties, business community, people in labor, people, whoever, as an office that advocates for the state. I advocate for individuals. I'm working in an area, people say Democrats won't do well in Appalachia. Maybe, maybe not. But one of the main things I'm working on is how to make sure that mine workers and Teamster, there are 60,000 of them in Ohio whose pensions are at risk. I've led the charge bipartisanly now with Orrin Hatch. We're co-chairs, a Republican from Utah that's retiring, likely will be replaced by Mitt Romney. I've worked with Orrin Hatch and Senator Portman's on our special 16-person committee to make sure that these mine workers get the pensions that, in essence, Wall Street helped to steal from them. So all of those kinds of issues, I listen to people. My job is to go around the state and listen to what people have to say and turn that into legislation and turn that into advocacy.
You raised a topic that is on my to-get-to list here, but
Mitt Romney?
Okay,
No,
pension reform.
okay.
No, pension reform. So, realistically, aren't there a lot of pensions that are so far underground that they'll never get back to the benefits that the workers and retirees were promised? Realistically, you're doing what you can to preserve those, but shouldn't a number of people who are in pension plans expect to see their benefits be less than they were?
I don't give up that easily. I know I've heard that. I've heard people say that. I understand that most of the young people sitting here will not have a defined pension benefit.
What's a pension? Right.
Yeah, what's a pension? And that's tragic. That means we've got to do better on 401ks, and I'm working with Senator Crapo, a Republican from Idaho, on finding ways to entice investment and automatic enrollment and acceleration of the dollars in the systems. That's another day, another issue. But these are workers. Washington doesn't really understand collective bargaining. These are workers that sat at the bargaining table 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, said, okay, I'll give up $2 an hour in my pay today, dollars I'd like to have, but I'll give up $2 today so I can put that aside and the company will match in one of these multi-employer plans. It might be a construction company, a transportation company. It might be Nichols Bakery in Navarre in Stark County. It might be Spangler Candy and Bryan. They were two companies that testified at our hearing. And that money will be put aside. And I should be guaranteed that because that was the deal. Because of Wall Street shenanigans and some other things, that money's at risk. And I think that, this is a government that could bail out the banks and give the bankers far too much and show this bias towards the wealthiest interest groups in the country. It's time they help the workers and small business. There are also 280 businesses in Ohio that are under duress because of this. If we don't do this pension fix, that's why my commitment is to get this done. We have a deadline, November 30th, and I'm going to see Senator Hatch when we get back after the election, win or lose, and be ready to fix this pension.
So if you were handicapping the odds of this legislation passing, you would say they are?
I would say 60% now. I would have said 40% 3 months ago, but I think there is real movement now. And if we don't get it done, I would say 60% to get it done by November 30th. I would say higher after that because I'm not giving up. This is as important as anything I've ever done. This is 60,000 Ohioans in 280 Ohio businesses that are really hit hard. And you think what happens to communities. There are communities where there are some of these companies and some of these workers, if those pensions get cut by half and those companies have to lay off people, it affects the whole school district and everybody else. Yeah.
So you've spent more than 40 years in public office in various state and federal positions, and you are arguably a career politician. Do you shrink from that description? Many people have a disparaging view of that.
Yeah, including my opponent, but of course.
Of course.
Yeah, I look at it this way, that because of my experience, I have the skills to do a lot of things that on this pension bill or on the earned income tax credit or helping Akron U on something. My opponent, he loves to talk in our debates about how he hates Washington. Well, I think he hates Washington because he went there for the wrong reasons. He's a decamillionaire, if that's what tens and tens of millions means. And he went to Washington.
34 million, okay, I think. But who's counting?
But he went to Washington as a millionaire to help millionaires and billionaires. I went to Washington to fight for health care. Let me give you two examples. When I went to Congress a number of years ago, I promised to voters that I would always pay my own health insurance. I wouldn't take the government plan, the congressional Cadillac plan, one of a better term. I wouldn't take that plan until Congress passed health insurance. I paid my own health insurance for over a decade. I also, as a member of the Senate, on the Senate Banking Committee, and I'm the senior Democrat on that committee, I don't own any corporate stocks because I think it's a conflict of interest for a U.S. Senator to own corporate stocks because everything we do can affect that. So I go to Washington because I believe that government can do good things. Part of the reason higher education, part of, you think what, go back 50 years ago, Congress established Medicare, established the Higher Education Act, which was later leading to the Pell Grants, which a number of students in this audience benefit from. School's still too expensive, but at least it's a role that helps. Congress, and I wear this canary pin. It's a depiction of a canary in a birdcage going down in the mines. The worker in those days had no union to protect him and government that cared enough to protect him. His safety was all on him. And look what we've done: safe drinking water, clean air, civil rights, women's rights, Medicare, Social Security, minimum wage, workers' compensation. And those aren't government dictates, they're partnerships. And that's why I go to Washington every week. It's why I get up and fight for workers regardless of where they work and regardless of their politics and regardless of who they are.
So are you back on the Congressional Health Plan now?
I am on the Congressional. I'm in the exchanges that the Affordable Care Act set up. I am.
You've just set a record for raising the most money in a Senate race in Ohio. I think 27.1 million was the last reported figure, which obviously will be probably significantly greater by the time we get to the finish line. How do you feel about that? Obviously, I'm guessing you're going to tell me that you're proud because it represents small donations by a lot of ordinary people
I'm going to tell you that.
Who you've been crusading for and championing. But I have a feeling that if it was your opponent that set the record, we'd be hearing a lot of talk about campaign finance reform.
Yeah, and you'll hear that from me. I didn't create this system. I wish we had Spending limits, I fought for spending limits when I was in Columbus, and we never won those, in part because we had a Supreme Court that's far too much enthralled to the richest people and like this campaign finance system. Of course we should have limits. Of course this is not the best way to run a democracy. I've raised a lot of money. I've had 155,000 contributors. Our average contribution is $42. Nobody with any sense can accuse me of fighting for Wall Street or fighting for corporations that outsource jobs or fighting for the drug companies or fighting for the gun lobby. I mean, those are the groups that spend. I mean, I had more money spent against me in no whining in this, but I had more money spent against me in 2012 than any Senate race in the United States of America in history at that time. And it was the oil companies, it was the drug companies, it was Wall Street, the insurance companies, the gun lobby, people that want to take me out, and that's why I fight back.
You spoke of 2012. Would this race have been a lot different if your opponent was Josh Mandel?
I don't know. I have no way of knowing that.
But obviously,
if anybody remembers who he is, I don't know. Yeah. You do. You've been doing this a while.
Right. In your time in Congress, you have sponsored or co-sponsored an awful lot of legislation. Do you know how many pieces of legislation, to be accurate?
I don't add it up. But
well, according to the website, Congress.gov, 7,247, and that probably doesn't include some in the last month or so. So you're prolific. But pick 3 pieces of legislation from the last term that ultimately got passed, that you were the driving force behind, that you think made a significant difference to a lot of Ohioans.
I hadn't thought of this through, so I might give you 3 different ones if you gave me an hour, but I'll come up with you.
Okay.
First, the Earned Income Tax Credit, which we expanded it. It's if people make 20, 30, 40, 50,000 a year, they're working hard. They're not making a lot of money for their hours. We expanded the Earned Income Tax Credit, so they will get an extra $1,000, between $1,000, depending on family size and all, between $1,000 and $2,000 refundable tax credit. That's money in their pocket, and that makes a huge advantage, a huge difference in somebody making $30,000 a year. Second issue I'm working on right now in the Farm Bill. I'm the first Ohio senator in a half a century to be on the Ag Committee. I grew up milking Guernsey cows in Richland County, south between Cleveland and Columbus. And I care about agriculture, but more importantly, I know what it means to our state. Mm-hmm. This Farm Bill is important as a nutrition bill. It's important for family farmers, and it's especially important for Lake Erie. We have provisions in this Farm Bill that I helped to write on the so-called conservation title that will keep a lot of the fertilizer runoff and other contaminants out of the Black River or the Cuyahoga River or more importantly near Toledo, out of the Maumee or out of the Auglaize or out of the Blanchard rivers as they feed into Lake Erie, causing these algae blooms. Lake Erie is only 30 feet deep on the western basin and very vulnerable, why we have environmental clean air, clean water problems in Lake Erie. Third issue is one I teamed up recently with, it is a series of bills. I teamed up with Rob Portman on opioids on something called the CRIB Act. This is how I do my job. I look around Ohio, I meet with people. Yesterday I was in a place called Bridget's Path in Dayton. It's one of 2 in the country. And it's as simple as this. It takes babies after their health is stabilized that are born of addicted mothers, and it cares for them in a less expensive and more intimate and nurturing way than a NICU, than a neonatal intensive care unit would do. And because of my legislation, and Senator Portman helped on it with that and some other opioid bills, because of my legislation, that bill, that will, as soon as the president signs it, probably sometime, I don't know, late October, I'm not sure when he's going to sign it, but he will, there will be a number of these Bridget's Path all over the country. And I found out when I was there that I thought it was called Bridget's Path because of a cute little girl baby they might have taken care of, but it turns out that I didn't know this. Bridget is the patron saint in Ireland for newborn babies. So I thought you might want to know that as a guy that speaks to a lot of Irish Catholic Clevelanders that are paying attention.
Friends and neighbors?
Yep.
Okay.
The west side of Cleveland.
We'll tuck that away. You spoke of your relationship with Senator Portman. Obviously, there's a common interest in the state of Ohio. Do you ever talk to him about, President Trump's behavior, President Trump's maybe some people find objectionable words or actions, and say, hey, Rob, couldn't couldn't you be more vocal in criticizing the president? Does that ever come up at all?
It does not. It comes up. I speak to a number of my colleagues about President Trump, most of my Republican colleagues know that Trump is divisive. A lot of them think he's a bigot. A lot of them think he doesn't respect women. A lot of them think he is much too divisive in the way he governs.
But they don't call him out on
They
it.
don't call him out, and I think they don't. And I don't push him. It's not my place to tell other senators what to do. I think they don't call him out because they like what he's getting. Because President Trump fundamentally is governing like a special interest Republican. He helps Wall Street. He helps the polluters, frankly. He weakens the Environmental Protection
From
Agency.
their perspective, he's getting things done.
Yeah, they give him young right-wing judges. They give him what he wants, and they're afraid of the base. The Republican base in this state, 80% of the Republicans still really like Donald Trump, and those votes. That's just the way it is. Read into that what you want.
Given your relationship with Senator Portman, are you at all disappointed?
I don't judge that way. It's kind of funny. I was thinking when Rob and I are friends. We play softball games against each other. Our offices talk all the time. I talk to him all the time. We've teamed up on trade enforcement. We've teamed up a little bit on the Farm Bill. We've teamed up a lot on opioids. We team up on preserving Lake Erie against the president's assault. The president's tried to. The president has no interest in keeping Lake Erie clean. He's cut funding every chance he gets. The Appalachian region, all these things I work with Rob on. I don't go into the bigger issues with Rob. We disagree on tax reform. We disagree on the Consumer Protection Bureau.
So you agree to disagree.
So I just don't bring those up. The relationship's too important to me.
Do you think Ohio and Ohioans are better off now than they were 21 months ago when the president took the oath of office and began being the guy in charge? The economy is arguably better, and people say, well, why shouldn't he get some credit for that?
Well, I don't think voters particularly care. You go back to the day, at least the month that the economy began to grow was when we did the auto rescue in 2009 and 10, I believe 10, when it was finalized. And we've seen growth every month since then. To me, the measure of an economy is not the stock market. I'm happy the stock market's going up, good. It's what's happening to wages. And what you see in this country right now is profits are up for corporations, executive compensation's going through the roof, productivity's up, but wages are flat. And the gains from this economy overwhelmingly go, as did the tax cut gains. More than 3/4 of the tax cut dollars went to the most affluent people. That's who's benefited the most from this economy. If you interviewed the students in the hall here, in the room we're in, the studio, if they're like most students I've talked to, they're concerned about what kind of job they can get to pay back their student loans, because you graduate with student loans, you may put off marriage because of the cost. The debt. You may not start a business that you dreamed of since you were 16, and you had an idea one day when you're, on the dance floor or out playing basketball or whatever. You may put off having children as a result, and you can't buy a house. All the kinds of things that shouldn't be happening this generation. We're seeing no progress on that score. So, the president brags a lot, nobody we've ever seen. But I wish he'd focus more on wages. He's opposed to the overtime rule, which gave 130,000 Ohioans a job. My opponent calls the federal minimum wage ridiculous. The federal minimum wage hadn't been raised at $7.25 an hour.
$7.25 an hour.
A little higher in Ohio.
I think his argument was that, but it's up to the states. The economic climate's different state by state.
I hear that, but I also don't hear him ever advocating for a higher minimum wage in the states either.
We see some big corporations. Amazon most recently raised some eyebrows when they raised their pay scale to $15 an hour. What do you think it's realistic to have the federal minimum wage?
I think you phase it in.
That's the floor.
Yeah, I think you phase in $15 an hour. You don't say all of a sudden you got to do it tomorrow. Maybe you make it in companies above a certain size. I'm willing to negotiate on all those things, but you've got to. The average. So many workers in this state. So many workers. If they work for big companies. These companies often outsource security people. They outsource to another company food service. They outsource custodial work. And those workers, while the company may pay $15 an hour, and I applaud that, and I call the CEOs often if it's an Ohio company, thank them, they farm out a lot of these other jobs at $9 and $10 and $11 and $12. I give credit to the big hospitals around the state now. They're increasingly understanding you should pay your food service people as you should pay your orderlies and others at least a living wage. And this country is so wealthy, the rich are getting richer and richer, corporate profits are up. Can't we pay the workers that serve us, the people that nobody pays attention to? Elected officials rarely pay attention. The public rarely pays attention to the woman cleaning the hotel room and the security guard outside the TV station, or the people walking around campus that are cleaning the rooms. I mean, those are, we don't know their names,
out of
and we
sight,
don't pay
out of
them.
mind.
Yeah, and they need advocates,
Yeah.
and I will always advocate for them, because when I say I fight for all workers, it's the office work. It's the woman at my high school reunion in Mansfield making $30,000 a year after 30 years working at a big bank. It's her. It's she I advocate for. Or her I advocate for. Help me in the grammar here. I'm on a college campus, and it's the person making 80 or 90,000. It's the police officer. It's the firefighter. It's the construction worker, union, non-union alike. And most of official Washington doesn't think about the dignity of work. They don't think about these workers. They don't think about these students struggling when they get out of school and trying to figure out, how do I make enough, even not in my field, how do I make enough to start paying back these loans?
You've been a big critic of trade agreements. The president has just put together a son of NAFTA agreement here with Canada and Mexico. Did I understand you in the first debate say you had some input into that?
A lot. Mm-hmm.
And how did that happen?
It happened because this trade representative is a guy I've known. I think the president's trade representative is his best nominee. He's from Ashtabula, Ohio.
Who is that?
Bob Lighthizer, my wife's hometown. You may not know this, but
I was born in Ashtabula.
Okay. Well, Bob Dylan sang a song once about Ashtabula,
Right,
and he
right.
rhymed Ashtabula and Honolulu, which only Bob Dylan could get away with, nonetheless. Lighthizer, I introduced him he was a Bob Dole assistant. I met him 10, 15 years ago. I worked with him on trade. He's a smart guy. He's right on most of the trade issues. I introduced him at the committee hearing to be confirmed, and was.
So
with
you
him.
had his ear,
Yeah,
and you think
all
a lot
along.
of
And I talked to him,
of what evolved was your input.
A lot, but not yet enough, and we're going to continue to work on it. The labor standards are strong. For me, to me, the trade. I look. The problem in this country with trade is we've had a trade and tax policy that encourages companies to shut down production in Mansfield and Garfield Heights and Niles, Ohio, and move overseas and build a plant and collect a tax break, and then sell the goods back into the United States. And that's just a morally and economically bankrupt policy. So my view of trade is, does this renegotiating NAFTA, they're calling it USMCA, United States Mexico Canada agreement, I guess, is this enough of an improvement over NAFTA? I voted against NAFTA early in my career, first year of my career. Is this enough of an improvement to stop these jobs flowing outsourced? But here's my problem. And just last spring or early in the summer, my wife and I, for years, drove Chevy Cruzes made in Youngstown. This suit I wear is made by union workers 10 miles from my house in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. And we drove a Chevy Cruze for a number of members of my staff and family, bought a Chevy Cruze made in Youngstown. They announced they were laying off the second shift. The same day they laid off the second shift, they announced they were building a plant in Mexico. Why? Because the tax bill sets up, if you're manufacturing in Youngstown or Cleveland, you pay a 21% tax rate. If you move overseas, you pay a 10.5% tax rate. So in essence,
what's wrong with
the
this
tax
picture?
package, it gave a 50% off coupon for a company if you want to move it overseas. So you can renegotiate, you can do the USMCA, but if you don't fix the tax part of that bill, the tax part of the law, you're going to see companies continue to move. I personally called President Trump, asked him to intervene. He didn't know about it. He said he'd get back to me. He's never called. I've asked him to call GM and say, you can't do this. You can't move that production.
How long ago was that?
He's had enough time. It was July, maybe. I don't know. It's been months.
The son of NAFTA agreement, as it exists now, is not.
It's an improvement.
Yeah.
And I'm not giving up on it. I mean, we're still working on it's it's voted on. It has to sit out there till November 30th, till it's signed by the three leaders, Canada, Mexico, and there's a new president in Mexico, so that's a little bit of a bump, I think, a speed bump. The three presidents are prime ministers. Then Congress has to do something called implementing legislation. And so it's not nearly done. It's made progress in labor standards. The labor enforcement is still too weak. Lighthizer, I'm not saying anything to you publicly that I haven't told Lighthizer on the phone.
Okay, so bottom line, though, it's better but not good enough.
At this point, it's better and not good enough. Correct.
President's tariffs.
Yeah.
Do you believe those will be more helpful or harmful to Ohio companies and workers?
If done right, they help. My first contact with the president was 3 days after the election. I called candidate Trump, left a message for him saying I would help him with renegotiation of NAFTA, and that I wanted to work with him on trade policy. I said I wanted to strengthen Buy America provisions. My first actual conversation on the phone with him was about Buy America. I cautioned him not to play off industry against agriculture, farmers against steel workers. I agree with the tariffs. I've supported him on the tariffs. Not many members of Congress in either party have. But understand, tariffs are a temporary trade tool, not a long-term trade permanent policy. I'm not sure he is moving in that direction. I also said, aim your tariffs at the countries, the serial cheaters, the countries that cheat over and over, Turkey, South Korea, and especially China. He, unfortunately, in the early days, aimed the tariffs at Western Europe and in Canada, and I thought that was a mistake. But I will continue to work with them. I think these tariffs work for us as a country because China has such a history of cheating, stealing intellectual property, subsidizing their energy, their capital, their land, their water. And I think we can compete with China on wages.
Ultimately, how do we win that conflict, that battle with China? If it gets to a point where Americans are paying more for consumer goods and all those products made in China,
it's a hard stream to navigate. I think the president needs to explain to the American people what the plan is, and I don't think people know, and that's why I think you've seen so much sort of turmoil about these tariffs. And I'm concerned about soybean farmers. As I said, I'm on the Ag Committee. I've worked with them. Agriculture, like business, generally wants predictability, and the president's changing course a number of times undermines. I mean, one of the reasons we got to pass this farm bill that I worked on, and you'd ask, we talked about that initially, we got 86 votes in the Senate, more than ever before, to show how I know and we know how to do things bipartisanly. 86 votes, but the House passed a partisan bill. The law has now expired, so there's uncertainty. And if you're a grain farmer, if you're planting corn or soybeans in Mercer County or in Coldwater, Ohio, you want predictability. You want to know what's going to happen. You can't have total predictability in farming, of course, prices and weather, but you don't want the government upending that predictability as the president has done on agriculture and trade.
You are certainly aware, as a resident of Cleveland, I'm sure, you are certainly aware of a very active push going on among aspirational leaders in the community there to make Cleveland a leader in something called blockchain technology. It's now a vital part of tracking transactions in cryptocurrency. Mm-hmm. I talk like I know what I'm talking about. But people who are more knowledgeable say that it ultimately could be the key to a lot of jobs and a lot of different businesses, and that Cleveland is potentially positioned to perhaps be a leader in this area. What is your opinion of the effort? I mean, is it a long shot, big reach? Is it doable? Is there some role that you could play as a senator on all this? Are you up to speed on this enough to have some thoughts?
Yeah, I have some thoughts, but I don't have great expertise on it. We did a hearing 2 weeks ago on cryptocurrency and blockchain technology, and I'd separate them. Cryptocurrency is a potential upending, destabilizing threat, if not regulated, to our financial institutions, to our financial structure. I mean, we know, as you point out, I live in Cleveland. My wife, Connie, and I live in zip code 44105. Our zip code in 2007, the first half of that year, had literally more foreclosures than any zip code in the United States. So I know what Wall Street shenanigans and deregulation and greed can do to an economy. And it did it to that part of Cleveland, and multiply that in Dayton and Akron and Canton and Youngstown and Mansfield and Zanesville and Portsmouth and everywhere else. So I'm very cautious about what we allow with this currency like that, with this cryptocurrency, because if we don't set these rules right, people game the system, and we have real destabilization in the financial services system, in the financial markets, in the financial underpinning of the economy. Crypto, I think that there is real potential, and I know that John Penny in Cleveland, law firm in Cleveland, has really thought a lot about this with blockchain technology. And I just think Cleveland, we have so much to offer. We have, in a social sense, we have the best art and music of any place in the Midwest. And my sister-in-law, it says that per square foot, there's more artistic talent and beauty per square foot in University Circle in Cleveland than anywhere between Chicago and New York.
Like a little bit of Paris.
Yeah, a lot of Paris. I would say Paris has a little bit of Cleveland, is the way I would say it as a Cleveland partisan. We also have our hospitals and our technology, and look at the new upcoming neighborhoods in Cleveland and all over Northeast Ohio. And I feel that in all the big cities in Ohio. So I think we're gonna have breakthroughs in a whole bunch of new technologies that are real job producing, not stock market crazy kind of chessboard stuff that cryptocurrency might be, but on real human AI growth and technology.
So there's a big conference being held, I believe, well-known auto dealer Bernie Marino is having a conference that he's organizing in December to try and get some real momentum and get the community energized behind it. So you're all in on this?
Yeah, I think there's opportunity. I'm not part of that. I actually saw on the airplane Bernie Marino's daughter the other day and talked very briefly. But I support it. I mean, Cleveland's always had a huge number of entrepreneurs. We maybe don't think we did in the 70s, 80s, 90s now, but it's coming back.
Shifting gears, what is the proper role for the federal government in trying to address and get the opioid crisis under control? You mentioned some legislation that you and Senator Portman have recently passed, but I mean, is there more to be done with the FBI, the DEA, or is it just throw a lot of money at it? I mean, what role can the federal government, should the federal government play in trying to get things under control?
We just passed our opioid bills. As we said earlier, the president will likely sign in the next week or so. It's partly law enforcement, but you don't arrest your way out of it. And I've worked on my only bill signing I've done with the president was the Interdict Act I helped write, which will will help to detect fentanyl and carfentanil at the border. I want to extend that to police. And that's one of the, I talk to the police all the time about things like that. It's one of the reasons that Fraternal Order Police has endorsed my campaign again. But it's way more than that. It's scaling up local treatment programs. It's lifting Senator Portman and I, through roundtables we both were doing around the state, learned there was a legal limit on the number of beds a treatment facility could have. We got that lifted in this bill. So if a facility can scale up and do it right, they will be able to take care of more people at the same time.
Well, there's obviously a huge demand for treatment beds, and you say this will make a significant
this will make a difference. And one of the things I'm working on, we didn't get involved in this bill with Senator Capito, West Virginia Republican, is something as simple as the government spends a good bit of money in Medicaid, as we should. The government spends a good bit of money on job training, as we should. Far too many people go through treatment for addiction, come out clean, but then can't find work. And they are more likely to go back to a downward spiral in their lives. What Senator Capito and I are doing is helping to merge federal dollars already in the communities into job training and opioid treatment, so that you go through the treatment. Right. You're also getting job training. You come out, you have a skill.
I think there's an acknowledgement.
So there's a lot of things like that.
Opioid treatment and lack of jobs and lack of education are all kind of
lack of opportunity. Yeah, exactly right.
What's your position on State Issue 1, the proposal that I think the sales pitch is it'll save lives and save money. It'll take the now felony offenses of drug use and drug possession, make them misdemeanors, hopefully get more people into treatment programs, and perhaps release more carefully selected prisoners from state prisons and save money in that regard, with all the money being plowed back into treatment programs. You are for that? How will you vote?
Yeah, I honestly don't know how I'm going to vote, and there is disagreement in my family, and we're talking about it. I mean, disagreement in terms of a number of us haven't come to a decision yet. I certainly like the intent. I mean, we lock up too many people for relatively trivial drug offenses. That doesn't serve them, it doesn't serve their family, it doesn't serve their neighborhood, it doesn't serve taxpayers. I want to make sure this is written right. I'm very concerned about more fentanyl and carfentanil, especially on the streets. I will make that decision in the next few days, and will likely announce it.
Okay. You're concerned at all about the cluttering up the Constitution with secondary issues?
I'm not a lawyer, and I always hear that argument. I don't really know what that means, cluttering up the Constitution. The Constitution's long in Ohio. If the Constitution, I mean, if it works for our state, put it in the Constitution. If you need to make adjustments, as you always do, you find ways. You know, clever legislators and lawyers, reasonably smart people, will find ways to fix some of the statutory language around the Constitution and make it work. We've done that for decades.
So it doesn't trouble you that this proposal was crafted by not Ohioans largely?
Well, I just want it done right. I mean, not every good idea starts here. We learn things from other states.
So which way are you leaning?
I'm probably leaning to support, but that's about as far as I can say. I'm not there yet.
Legalization, potential legalization, going to be a question coming around the corner eventually here, of recreational marijuana. Mm-hmm. You would be supportive?
I supported for years the medicinal use of marijuana. I'm not ready to say yes on legalization yet. Again, I don't want people going to prison for possession like we've seen too often. It's targeted particularly to communities of color, the law enforcement too often, just because that's how our society, I don't blame individual police, but that's how it's worked out. I want to see more what's happened in Colorado with their legalization. There are banking issues around it, believe it or not, because we have an attorney general that scares people on enforcement of this. There are, ancillary issues of marijuana use, and I think we need another year or two of Colorado to see. They're the first state that, as you know, that is legalized, and you get very different stories depending on whom you talk to there.
Okay, so sort of the canary in the coal mine again here to see what's going on.
Okay, fair enough. Well done, thank you.
Is illegal immigration a serious problem in Ohio?
Immigration the system's broken. There are far too many. I mean, the enforcement of, first of all, I still find it abhorrent that this president and his supporters in Congress seem to think it's okay to pull children away from their families at the border. And think about it this way, and this didn't occur to me until one day Connie and I were talking about this. There are children, our grandchildren, we have 7 grandchildren, 4 of them are under 4. 5 of them, under 4, and they probably don't know their parents' names. So if they're separated from their parents, they don't know their parents' names. They don't know the city they live. They can't. And we as a country are doing that. So let's get serious about immigration. We're not going to deport 13 million people that are here without documentation. We should be deporting people who commit a crime. We shouldn't be doing raids on people who have been here for 10 years and are paying their taxes and doing the work, and in nurseries and in agriculture especially, or in hotels or whatever they're doing. We shouldn't be arresting them and deporting them when we're not deporting people who have committed real crimes. And again, these are people, they're raising their kids, they're active in their church, they're working hard, they're paying taxes, they're paying into Social Security. A number of them won't get any money out of Social Security, but they're paying in. And why do we keep making this about politics and scaring people and dividing people? And again, breaking up families at the border is just the most immoral thing I can remember our country doing.
What are your thoughts about the idea that some ultra progressives are advocating abolish ICE?
Oh, I don't think those are ultra progressives. I think those are presidential candidates. I got nothing more to say about it. It doesn't make any. You don't abolish ICE. You fix ICE. You make it work. And ICE has not been run well by this administration. Ergo, breaking up children at the border. But you make ICE work.
You introduced presidential candidates here. I mean, I know we're way ahead of the game here, but obviously people are floating trial balloons and testing the waters, and
some of them have been in campaigning for me. All right,
yes,
and for my opponent. So
right. So, any thoughts about the various names being floated in your party as to which you find more?
I think about the presidential race about 1 nanosecond every 24 hours.
And then a bunch of reporters keep asking
I just don't care. I just think that, I don't want Donald Trump to be president for 4 more years. I don't want Mike Pence to be president ever. But that time will come. There will be primaries and there will be arguments and the party will discuss it. And 17 people ran for Republican president.
So realizing that it's way too soon and you don't want to talk about it, but I'm going to ask anyway here, so the obligatory.
You say the obligatory. Who makes you do this
obligatory?
Who decides it's obligatory? Okay.
Somebody.
Okay, President Green, does he make it obligatory?
No, there have been articles,
articles
written that suggest that you would be an excellent presidential candidate because you could perhaps unify the rift in the party between mainstream and more progressive. And do you envision yourself seriously considering campaigning for president?
I don't have this great desire to be president first, period. Yeah. What I would like to come out of this election is Trump won this state by 8.5 points. And that means people think Brown's going to have trouble winning this race, or at least they thought that a year ago. I want to show the country, and I especially want to show Democrats around the country that you can win a state like Ohio by being a progressive and speaking out for worker rights and talking about the dignity of work and speaking for consumers and pointing out what Republicans are going to do in pre-existing condition to take away consumer protections. And you can talk about women's rights and civil rights and gay rights and win Ohio decisively. I want to show my colleagues that's what you do and that's how you win Ohio. Because I don't want to happen, this is a purely political statement now, but it's a patriotic statement because I love my country. I don't want to happen where Donald Trump loses the popular vote again, by this time 4 million instead of 3 million, but the Electoral College, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, he wins by a sliver of votes. And it's not good for our country, partly because the popular vote winner should not lose the election. That just is sort of counter-democratic for me.
You're putting an awful lot on your shoulders.
No, I just want to see this. I want to see the National Democratic Party understand how you win in states like Ohio.
Back to immigration just for a second. In 2006, you voted in favor of something called the Secure Fence Act. Yeah. Meant to build hundreds of miles of fencing and add more checkpoints and surveillance cameras to stop illegal immigration across the Mexican border. Most of that never got built because Homeland Security had issues with it. Congress never came up with appropriating all the money for it. But 12 years later, how is President Trump's wall different from what you voted for?
Well, that was I might have cast the wrong vote then, frankly. But I think so. But I would say this, that there were way more people coming across the border then. President Obama's presidency really slowed the immigration coming in. I guess immigration coming in is redundant, but immigration. Number one. Number two, we got better with technology on the border. Helicopters, better training of ICE officials, all the things we did then. And third, President Trump promised in his campaign over and over who's going to build the wall, and the crowd would yell Mexico, and he'd promise Mexico would pay for the wall. So his supporters have forgotten, as they demand to build the wall, that that $50 billion was coming from Mexicans, or 40 billion or 60 billion or whatever the new estimate is each time. So it's a bit of a sleight of hand, this whole wall thing. But the U.S. government, U.S. taxpayers spending tens of billions of dollars to build the wall. I'd rather spend it on infrastructure in Maple Heights and Cleveland and Elyria and Lorain and Youngstown than I would on building a wall that we already know how to keep most undocumented people out of this country.
So hindsight is 20/20. Maybe you got it wrong.
Maybe I got it wrong. Maybe the circumstances were surely different, but I might have been wrong. I don't know.
Is it time for some younger leadership in the Democratic Party and Congress? Is it time for some new faces to replace Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi?
That's two questions. Is it time for younger
Okay,
basis.
we'll take them
and I
one at a
would
time.
say not in the Senate race in Ohio, because Congressman Renacci's only like 5 years younger than I am, so I would not argue for him on this question. Yeah, I mean, I think highly of both of them, and who are leaders now. I mean, Mitch McConnell's in his 70s. I don't know who's going to replace Paul Ryan, but the House Representatives, I don't care how old they are running it, the Republican leaders in the House of Representatives have done a lousy job leading that place. That's why the country hates Congress so much. So I don't know. I think it's the quality of the leader. I always want new blood. And what excites me this year, look at the state ticket, people like Kathleen Clyde, young Rob Richardson, people who are a generation younger than Mike DeWine. And Rich Cordray's a good bit. I mean, Rich Cordray's really in his prime of life, if I could ever judge that with anybody. But I mean, I like very much this Democratic ticket because they have a lot of life and diversity and energy that the Republican ticket doesn't have. And I think that's one reason it's going to be a pretty good year for Democrats statewide.
So you're making the point about the Republican ticket being white male, white male, white male,
You
white
made that
male,
point.
white male.
I just said that
Well,
they lack the diversity and energy and ideas. It's more than they just all look like me or you. It's that there's not any new ideas coming out of their side. I mean, all their ads are scaring people about sanctuary cities. They're not. What are you going to do in healthcare? What are you going to do in education? I mean, this state's one of the highest in the country in infant mortality. This state has more opioid deaths than the other state. We don't invest in infrastructure. Look at the conditions of our cities and suburbs and small towns. Yet we have a legislature that's trying to pass more concealed weapon laws, and a legislature that continues to want to cut taxes on the richest people instead of investing in our communities. And that's what I mean by tired old ideas. And you see it in Washington and you see it in Columbus.
That's why you wind up with ballot issues to amend the state constitution because
the legislature simply doesn't do its job.
Forthcoming.
Correct.
What newspapers, websites, networks do you regularly read or watch?
I read the Plain Dealer every day, except they only deliver it 4 days. Explain that business plan.
Explain that business plan. I don't think either one of us
read
can
the
do
Wall
that.
Street Journal every day. I read the New York Times every day. I get a lot of clips from my office. I look at on my iPhone. I have briefings on all kinds of things.
So you Wall Street
yeah,
Journal.
but I also
you get a political spectrum balance. Do you think?
Right. Oh yeah. I mean, I mean, the difference is the New York Times may be liberal, but it's not a partisan Democrat. The Wall Street Journal is both conservative and partisan Republican. The Wall Street Journal, they hate budget deficits when they're Democratic presidents. Now they say we'll grow out of it. Anyway, I'll leave that at that. But I also, because I have a Pulitzer Prize winning wife, I read novels too, and I try to read a number of books a month and at least a couple of novels, and my daughters continue to pester me about things like that.
When this election is over, from your perspective, assuming you win, will you still be the only Democratic statewide office holder in Ohio?
No, they're going to be.
You see a blue wave?
I see a blue wave if Democrats create a wave. I don't think anything's automatic. I think that we will. I will not be the only statewide Democrat after this election. I don't bet on elections, but if I did, I bet on baseball, and that doesn't work out so well.
Well, not
I don't even bet. I kind of gave up betting on baseball when I was like 12 because it didn't ever work out.
So which candidates are you predicting will win?
I'm not going to do that. I think we're going to, okay, I'll predict this. I think that if Cordray wins, the whole ticket wins, including the 2 Supreme Court justices, both endorsed by the Plain Dealer this week, Judge Stewart and Judge Donnelly, and I think the ticket does well.
We've been talking baseball here a little bit, and I think in recognition of the fact that you were one of the Indians' great super fans. Well, we're all still kind of in mourning, I think, for the rather dismal performance, but let's look ahead, looking for something hopeful in all this as you assess next year's chances. Has the window closed? Or
No, they got the best. They got 4 good starting pitchers, I think the best staff in baseball. They got to work in their bullpen. I hope they keep Brantley. And they got a little money now since they're probably going to lose Allen and Miller. So.
Miller.
I'm still mad though, if you really want to know.
Okay.
That because it's New York and Boston, that the Indians games were all played at some ungodly hour, like, I don't know.
And you didn't get to see them, right?
10 o'clock in the morning. No, I didn't get to see any of them. Nobody did. but nobody cared because it was New York, and you have to do New York, and got to take care of New York and Boston. You know how that works.
Well, I guarantee you
even people in Pittsburgh don't like that.
You didn't miss that much by.
I understand. I listened to him on the radio, and I when Bauer came out the third time, who had not been pitched in relief, I think his entire career, it was ugly.
All right.
Are we done yet?
Almost.
Okay.
We're closing in. Last question. These are almost kind of a cliched walk-off question. In the spirit of bipartisanship here, tell me one thing that Congressman Renacci has done or accomplished that you believe is admirable and worthy of recognition.
Okay. He and I have worked together on speaking of baseball, the Congressional Gold Medal for Larry Doby. Larry Doby was the first black player in the American League, came up 11 weeks after Jackie Robinson. Didn't play in the minors, so he had an even more uphill challenge. And venom aimed at him even than Robinson did, I think, certainly as much. And he was a superstar. He's in the Hall of Fame. And I congratulate Congressman Renacci. I mean, Congressman Renacci grew up in Pittsburgh and was a Pirate and Steeler fan, but he apparently is now an Indians fan, and he's for Larry Doby as I am. So there.
Okay. Well,
right.
Larry Doby, an iconic figure, and some people think does he have a statue, or he does have a statue?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, he does.
You need to go to more Indians games. You can see that statue.
Yeah. Well. Maybe the money I'm getting from this, I can buy some tickets next year.
Maybe you can.
Right?
I feel bad. I feel sorry for you.
That wraps up our time.
Thank you,
Senator,
Jordan.
thank you very much.
Always, thanks.
Greatly enjoyed
Thanks, me too.
talking with you. Thanks for coming by to discuss the issues. And thanks again to the Bliss Institute for making these interviews possible. And thanks to any and all of you who watched our discussions. We hope you found them informative. And I'm certain if you took the time to watch, you will take the time to vote. And who will be Ohio's next governor and senator? Now it's up to you.